Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Involves a program and a coach that we actually talked about on the most recent episode of the Aaron Torres Pod, and that is Lincoln Riley and the USC Trojans. So if you listen to the last episode, we recorded Wednesday, dropped it Thursday morning. USC was coming off Big Ten Media Days. They are obviously entering their first year in the Big Ten. And I don't want to call it a make or break year for USC, because despite what Paul Feinbaum wants to tell you, Lincoln Riley is not on the hot seat. He's not getting fired. They could go 0-12 and he's not getting fired. But at the same time, I do think from a perception standpoint, it is kind of an important year. You're coming off an 8-5 season. There's no doubt it was disappointing. The program seems to be trending in the wrong direction as they head into the Big Ten. And obviously there is this aura of a little bit of softness around both the USC program and Lincoln Riley himself. Well, I bring it up. What we're talking about today came out at Big Ten Media Days after we recorded on Wednesday. And it certainly isn't going to help the perception that Lincoln Riley is maybe a little bit soft. That is because, as we all know, USC and Notre Dame, they have like a 100-year rivalry. They've been playing forever. And Lincoln Riley kind of referenced, hey, with the way college football is going, we don't really know if we're going to keep this rivalry going beyond the current contract. And so I want to read what Lincoln Riley said. It's a long quote, but I want to read the full quote to be totally fair to him. But if you listen to this, it doesn't sound like USC and Notre Dame are maybe made for the long haul. Here's what Lincoln Riley said when asked about the rivalry with Notre Dame. I would love to continue it, basically, is what he said. I know it means a lot to a lot of people, the purist in you, no doubt. Now, if you get into a position where you got to make a decision on what's best for SC to help us win a national championship versus keeping that game, shoot, then you've got to look at it. And listen, we're not the first example of that. Look all the way across the country. There has been a lot of other teams sacrifice rivalry games, and I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. But as we get into this playoff structure, and if it changes or not, we're in this new conference. We're going to learn something about this as we go and what the right and the best track is to winning a national championship. That's going to evolve. He continued. Bama was ahead of the curve for years, I thought, on how they scheduled in the non-conference, right? They would occasionally hit the marquee non-conference game. They play 2 or 3 other not very good teams. They'd play one game late in the season so that they essentially got a little bit of a bye week right before there was a late season game when your season's going to go on and you're a little bit beat up. They didn't schedule for fans. It's kind of the money quote. Talking about Alabama. They didn't schedule for fans. They scheduled to win national championships. And so my hope is we can do the best thing, scheduled to win championships, and that includes a rivalry game for all that comes with that and all of it means. But you get in those positions and you've got to make a decision on what the priority is. It's not an easy answer. And so to be fair to Lincoln Riley, one, he didn't say that the Notre Dame rivalry is going to be done in the coming years, but he also didn't really make it seem like, hey, I'm ready to keep this thing going forward. And when I think about what he said, a couple things do stand out, some in defense of Lincoln Riley, some, frankly, not at all. One, what he said about Bama is true. Listen, I don't know if any Bama fans are going to listen to this, but at the end of the day, what he said is not wrong. Nick Saban, I actually liked what Nick Saban did. I didn't hate it. By the end, it kind of got to be a little bit of a drag. But essentially what Nick Saban would do, he would schedule a big out-of-conference game on a neutral field early in the season. We remember all of them. They played Miami. They played West Virginia. They played USC one year. They played Wisconsin. Then they played 2 or 3 nobodies, 2 or 3, what do they call them, tomato cans. You play the SEC schedule, and then right before the rivalry game with Auburn, they'd always have some kind of FCS team. Whether it's fair or not, that is what Alabama did. But I'll say this, even with Alabama, is by the end, Nick Saban kind of felt some pressure to like, hey, let's get some real games on the schedule. Fans aren't traveling to the neutral site games, whatever. That's why we've had Texas the last few years. Wisconsin is playing Alabama this year. So what Lincoln Riley said is not wrong. At the same time, let's go back to what I said to lead this part of the show, and that's this. if the perception is that Lincoln Riley is soft, I'm just here to tell you this certainly isn't going to help. Because when we think about Lincoln Riley, listen, there's no doubt that what he did at Oklahoma was really, really, really good. I'm not trying to discredit him. And as I said on last week's show, the guy is a quarterback whisperer. He is a great developer of offensive talent. But what I also said is that when you get into those big games against those elite opponents, there's no doubt that his teams are a little bit soft, and increasingly that it feels like he's a little bit soft. In terms of him, fair or not, he left Oklahoma. And we can do the song and dance of why he left or what he left, or he says it's all about USC. Okay, that's fine. But it happened right as Oklahoma's getting ready to go to the SEC, right after he finds out that they're not going to be in the Big 12. So the perception, fair or not, is that he was afraid of the SEC. 2, again, it comes down to his teams. At Oklahoma, run through the Big 12. Then you play that SEC team in the bowl game. Lose to Georgia at the Rose Bowl. Lose to Alabama at the Orange Bowl. Lose to LSU, and I think it was Atlanta. They get destroyed. So 3 straight years, you lose to a superior SEC team. And frankly, in all 3 games, you get beat up. Maybe not the first one, but certainly the last 2. The line play, there was just a clear difference. And even when he got to USC, there's no doubt. Yes, even in year 1, he won 11 games. But who are the 2 losses to in the Pac-12? Lost to Utah twice. Same thing. Got beat up, kind of soft, whatever. And finally, lastly, about Lincoln Riley, what I think is kind of important is the fact that, let's be honest, that in terms of scheduling over the last couple months, he has come off as kind of soft. We can, whether he's right or wrong is independent of the fact that he just doesn't look good publicly. And some of this, listen, maybe he doesn't care what people think publicly, but if I was USC, I'd have somebody kind of from PR just kind of walk him through what to say and what not to say. Like even with this Notre Dame thing, there's something you can say where like, hey, I want to keep it, but sometimes that's above my pay grade. We're going to a new 12-team playoff. The Big Ten has 9 games. We just don't know what the future of this game is. That's all you got to say. Instead, he says that, kind of gives an honest answer. I kind of respect it. I kind of appreciate it. But it doesn't change the fact that this comes off of the news that, remember, USC plays LSU to open the season in Vegas this year. There were reports in May that Lincoln Riley tried really hard to get this game off the schedule. Did not happen. Later in the spring, a home-and-home with Ole Miss gets canceled. This falls on Lincoln Riley, fair or not. Now, lastly, let me say this, because it's kind of like a Lincoln Riley, blame sandwich, basically. You know what do they say in corporate America? Like a compliment sandwich. If you want to criticize somebody, you say a compliment at the front, you give the criticism, compliment at the back. I'm kind of doing the same with Lincoln Riley, because at the end of the day, here is the truth about Lincoln Riley and USC. Is what I said about Bama is true, but also what he is saying about the future of college football, I believe, is true as well. We all love these big out-of-conference games, but I think what he's saying is accurate, is that as we get deeper into this, not only 12-team playoff era, but I think this era where such a balance of power is in the Big Ten and the SEC, I just don't know how excited SEC and Big Ten teams are going to be to schedule these marquee out-of-conference games. Just look at USC. What he said, by the way, isn't wrong. So you're playing Notre Dame this year. This is on top of the fact that you already have a neutral site game against LSU. You have to travel to Michigan. You get Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Penn State at home, okay? So even if you take LSU off the schedule, that's like 4 or 5 really marquee Big Ten games. And then you got to play Notre Dame at the end of the year. And so think about it from Lincoln Riley's perspective. Is he's kind of like, dude, if I'm 9-2 going into that last game, everybody else gets a bye. Nobody else is, all these SEC schools are playing FCS teams. I got to go play Notre Dame. That doesn't make sense. But again, beyond that, it's a detriment to him. It's a detriment to his team. And I think other SEC and Big Ten teams are going to start to feel the same way. Because if you look at across college football, what benefit, for example, Florida's playing Miami this year, okay? That's a great game. As a college football fan, I'm really excited about it. But if Florida loses that game, guess what happens? It's one more loss on an impossible schedule, but then two, it's also on top of everything else. It's not just a bad loss, it's a good win for Miami. Miami gets to say all year, I went into an SEC stadium and knocked the crap out of Florida. By the way, Clemson and Georgia play opening weekend. Again, I don't think Clemson's beating Georgia. But if Clemson beats Georgia, that's the game they hold their hat on all season, while Georgia's still got to play Texas. They still got to play Ole Miss. They still got to play at Bama. So what Lincoln Riley is saying, I don't love it. I think, frankly, somebody at USC just tell him not to tell the truth. But what he's saying isn't wrong. And as a college football fan, just be ready. Because I think a lot of the things that we loved past tense about the sport are already gone. And bluntly, I hate to say it, but I think some of the things that we love currently might not be there for the long haul. And I hate to say it, but I think some of these out-of-conference games are going to be part of it.